How we doing, folks? Hello, welcome to the BusPlanner webinar series for September. I'm going to do some brief intros and then we'll get right into it. So today we're talking about getting buy-in, working in a new student transportation department. As you folks know, there's always a lot of changes in transportation teams and districts in general, right? We have a lot of changes, whether folks are moving up, right, getting promotions, they're joining new districts. And as you're doing this change and as you're moving around, it's important to keep in mind, how can we be successful in our new roles? How can we be successful with our new teams? And so I'm very excited to be a part of this today. I'm also very excited to be joined by Cindy today, or Cynthia Mendez, as she's known to others. But Cindy and I have been working the BusPlanner for over a year now together. She's a rock star. I'll let her do a brief intro of herself, and then I'll intro me, and we'll get right into it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cynthia Mendez. I did spend 33 amazing years in school districts in Florida. I worked for three different districts. There was always I guess a little bit of a lull time as you change. I'm looking forward to talking with you all and sharing with you some of the successes I've had in making changes and going into a new district. Um, and we'll look forward to being open and answering any questions that you guys may have.
Exactly. And so I'm Gus Munoz. I am an account executive here at BusPlanner. I've done it all under the sun, right? Whether it was GPS or routing and everything in between. So I'm excited to be here today chatting with you. Excited to have this conversation with Cindy. Excited to give you actionable insights for you folks as you're exploring new roles, as you're joining new teams, as you're bringing in new people into the fold. You want to set them up for success. So we'll have a very well-rounded discussion today. That chat is always open if you have a question. There will be a formal Q&A at the end, which I'll show you here. And then throughout this conversation, we'll also pull up a couple polls. So if you feel inclined to answer those. But we have a pretty broad agenda today. There's a lot of ground to cover, particularly when we're talking about these changes in districts and these changes in transportation teams. So at a high level, what we're going to do is we're going to go over, day one. What does it look like? What are your typical challenges when you're brand new to a team? Getting buy-in, how do you overcome those challenges? How do you fight a resistance to change, or how do you adapt and join a new team wholeheartedly so you can get that buy-in, get that collaboration going? And that leads into communication, collaboration, and feedback. So how do we share our ideas in a way that's not confrontational? How do we share our ideas in a way that's beneficial to all? How do we get folks to align, adapt, and agree with us? And how do we build those different changes by getting the team together, by soliciting feedback, by getting everyone involved? Then we'll go into leveraging data. So not only are we going with our gut feelings here when we come to a new district or when we come to a new area, but how do we lever data to help prove what we want to do, or help prove the projects that we're interested in, or help get everyone aligned? And then we'll finish with a Q&A session. So I'll go to this next one here. We want to kick it off with a poll. So I want to ask here, what is the biggest challenge you face as a newcomer to your transportation team? That poll should be popping up. Got a handful of options here. If there's an option that's you want to answer that you don't see, you can also put it in the chat. But yeah, folks want to see what you have to say.
So, Gus, I think that there's various challenges that can happen to a newcomer, whether you're going from one department to another, or whether you are going from a private industry into government district work, or if you're going from one district to another, like I did. Right now, understanding an existing culture is 50% of the biggest challenges that some have faced as a newcomer. Um, I think that the culture changes are very important to actually address. I went from working for a little bit of a smaller district to a larger district, and I had a lot of culture shock. It was culture shock, not just moving from a small town to a bigger city, but things that I knew every day in student transportation. Some were the same in the mega district, but then there were a lot of things that weren't the same. And so those culture changes are important to see and to address.
Completely agree. Yeah, that culture change is huge. And honestly, like throughout all of our conversations, I mean, Cindy, you and I get to work with districts across the country. We get to work. You would think over state lines there might be a drastic change, right? And there often is. But even county to county, neighboring counties might have completely different processes. Neighboring cities might have different processes. There's no such thing as the same organization in transportation. Everyone does a little different. So you get your rules, so your compliance, your state rules that you got to follow, your federal rules you got to follow, but everything in between, lots of different changes. And so I think whether you're coming from a district that has 15 buses or a district that has 1,500 buses, there's always going to be a lot of change in between. And so, really excited to talk with you about your experience on those. And so when I think about challenges that are faced by a newcomer, by someone joining a new team, right? We hit the nail right there. It was like, it's a brand new world, brand new faces, brand new processes. And so can you talk a bit about, Cindy, you started as a driver, you made your way into the office, you learned these processes. Can you talk a bit about how that worked, and also, your next step after that when you joined a new team, how that looked?
So the transition for me from driver into the routing office was an easy transition. I actually was going to school for GIS mapping, so that was where I was going to take my career, or at least I thought so. I thought, and so transitioning from driver into that routing office, there was a little bit of a change. I was used to seeing things one way, and had to learn to see things a different way from a planning perspective. Routing is just planning. When the rubber hits that road, what you plan sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. You have all kinds of things that forces are against you. I think one of the key things that I learned in the two times that I moved into different districts is I had to give myself some time to adapt. And
Mhm.
adapt meaning I was learning my role. I was learning the roles of the people who I was now going to supervise. Um, I had to build trust with my fellow co-workers on my level. I had to build trust with my new staff employees. Um, I will tell you that, not to pat myself on the back, but I had great success in those adaptions, and the reason being is because I'm a believer in being a leader. I would roll up my sleeves and sit down with them and learn what they did or understand what they understood. But that adaptation period has to happen for you to learn pretty much what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis without fires. And then you start adding those little fires that happen in transportation. I mean, how many times
Yeah.
have we been on a call when they're like, hey, we got a fire, we got to run. It happens. So the adaptation period is important. And in that, during that few weeks, months that you start to adapt to that culture and learn, you start to see things that you want to put your input in for changes as well.
Yeah, completely agree. I think those first few weeks there are so critical, but also, from a management perspective, it's getting that validation that, like, hey, I can help you with your job. I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm being a leader versus I'm mandating something from the top. That goes a long way with office staff. That goes a long way with drivers, right? It's like leading from the front. But also, when you're joining a new team, and you have to learn all of these things very quickly, I kind of want to double click on that. So you have someone joining. There's a couple ways they typically join, right? Either they are coming in because someone's leaving, but it's a well-planned leave. Maybe they're retiring, maybe they're moving up, and so you have time to ensure that transition, which is awesome. Sometimes, though, as we hear across the country, you don't always get time for that transition, right? Sometimes it's a change is made, and all of a sudden you got to have someone that can just cover this spot, cover dispatch, cover routing, cover what have you. How do you ramp up those people? How do you get people aligned with the job quickly, in your experience as a supervisor?
I always looked for people that had experience either from another district or another transportation department. But in the interview, I was also very open and honest with, this is what the position is, or this is what we expect. But each day, something could come into play. And so you really have to try to find people that are willing and flexible for change, and and everybody is can be willing for change. It's just everybody has their own way of accepting it and moving forward with it. And so that's one of the things that I worked on a lot and with the team. And I think that one of the great things that I did was I truly had no judgment, open door policy. If I made a decision or if there was something that was done that didn't sit well with them or they didn't agree with, I had open lines where they could come in and voice their opinions to me. One of the things with adaption is you have to learn what motivates those people and then feed their motivation.
Completely agree. And that's what I think when you get newcomers in the office, whether you are a newcomer yourself or whether you're managing a team of newcomers, it's important to align those things. And so that kind of leads me, I would like to talk more about alignment. And so day one, you go into the job. How do you make a good first impression? How do you get your team to believe in you and start listening? And how do you also, maybe you come in with your own ideas, but also you want to make sure that you're listening and supporting the current processes too. How do you go about day one? Like, what would you recommend to folks to like get that trust and start building those relationships?
Honesty,
Honesty is
transparency,
key.
and
Yeah.
consistency. Uh, I think that you have to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk. Um, One of the things that I learned in moving into the last district I was in Osceola, is I learned a new respect for what I labeled as the historian. You have those people that have been in districts for years and they hold a lot of your key information. And so I learned a valuable lesson and learned quickly that those people and those people who I like to label historians have a lot of good knowledge. They also are those people that can help you change a culture and help other people, bring other people along with those changes. I think one of the things that I did that was very successful was I would bring the team in and say, here's what has to happen. We have to make this decision. Let's put our heads together. How do you feel about it? And what do you think that we could change or maneuver to get the same desired outcome as the quick outcome, but with everybody's input? And I think that everybody is valuable and everybody has value to add into decision making and into standard processes or policies that they have to work under in school districts,
Mhm.
especially in transportation. And I think valuing their input is very important, because if they know that you value their input, they're going to come along for those changes and that culture change and move with the times.
I completely agree. Yeah, you need people to buy in, but you need to pay respect to what's been established before. I love
Correct.
that term, the historians, the people that have been doing the hard work. You know, every office has one, someone that's been with the team for 15 plus years that has seen all the different ways that it's gone and seen all the ways that maybe projects have failed or projects have been super successful. That person is a treasure trove of takeaways and information. And so you always want to pay respect to that and learn from them too. You might disagree with them. Maybe, you know, you want to see something else come out of a future project, but you would be remiss not to take advantage of the information that sits with them. It's
Right.
really important to have those conversations, and if you can get them to buy into your projects, they go even further. Um, when we're talking about last couple bits on this slide here, but when we're talking about when new folks are joining teams, and they're seeing changes in transportation, again, whether it's a new transportation director, it's a new routing supervisor, it's a new router, a new dispatcher, you're joining the team and you have this new role and you're not familiar with these people, but you want to learn, you want to trust them, you want to build those relationships with them. There's still these overarching problems that are going on in the world of transportation, right? So think driver shortages, budget cuts, more demanding parents with less resources, right? Whether that means they want parent apps or they want, you know, more open communication, text, calls, emails, everything under the sun. Um, how do you go about divvying up your time when you're joining these new teams and getting this buy-in and getting the support from folks, but also managing those other greater expectations in transportation departments? How do you go about balancing these things? Do you see them as aligned, or do you see them as opposed to each other?
It could be both. Uh, so you try to keep things in alignment, but sometimes one way will teeter more than the other. I think that the driver shortages and budget constraints are 90% of districts' problems in today's society. Nobody can get enough bus drivers behind the wheel of a bus. And so when you're short drivers, more parents call and complain, your dispatchers, your routers, your principals are even getting tired of the phone calls and what can we do and how can we do things. If you have a collective group, and I'm going to refer to the routing office in this scenario, you have a collective group of people who understand the core mission of transportation is to transport students to and from school in the safest manner so that they receive their free appropriate public education. You can come together collectively as a team and find ways to shorten routes, delete routes, change runs. You look outside the box when you have a collaborative environment. And so in the routing team, while each router had their own schools or their own routes or their own runs they're responsible for, they're a collective team. And if one has an idea that will shorten somebody else's run or route or school, that can be moved to another area and a route deleted, that's one less driver you need. One less bus full of parents calling at two or three schools that are not calling with principals. So I think having a collaborative environment between your routing team and with your managers and your drivers, it really helps you understand what you can and can't do on the road, but it also gives everybody a voice and they feel valued. That collaborative environment is very, very important when it comes to those types of situations. The driver shortage is I will tell you, I don't know how many times I had to sit and tell parents, I'm sorry, you had to take your kid to school for the fifth day. The driver is sick, or we don't have a driver for that route. But I also use those opportunities to educate the parents what it takes to be a bus driver. You want to come join us. If you drive for your student school, we'll allow you to transport your kids on your bus. So there's ways in a collaborative environment like that, whether a person is just coming in or has been there for 20 or 30 years, everybody's got valuable input, and that collaboration with routing and your road and your operations staff can really help find you some efficiencies.
I think that's so key, and that's the crux of what we're getting at today. That's what we want to do is build that trust quickly, because transportation is a team sport. You'll hear that a billion times, but it's not a boxing
Sure.
match. It's not you versus the parents or you versus the admin. We need to change the way we think about it, where it's me and my transportation team in accordance with the parents, in accordance with the superintendent, in accordance with the admin
Agree.
staff, getting everyone in the right direction. That's how you win. And so it's really key to build this trust quickly so everyone can be driven. And it's so awesome that everyone is driven by the same mission, right? It's getting our kids to school on time so they can get a good education. And so let's talk about actionable steps. So, we come in, we identify the problems, or identify the challenges you might feel on day one. Let's talk about what's next. How do we actually earn this trust with folks? How do we build trust? I think you hit the nail on the head quite a few times already as we're talking through this, talking about your word is your bond. In transportation,
100%.
it's so key. Like, honesty is so key. If you say you're going to do something, follow up on it. If you don't, what is it? It doesn't mean anything to anyone. You don't get many shots at bat on that. And then listening first. I'm hoping you can tell me more about this from your experience, Cindy. When you go into a new team, day one, if you go and raise your hand and say, I think we should change this, this, and this because we used to do it like this in my last district, it's probably going to fall on deaf ears. How do you go about listening first? Do you go actively seek those historians we were talking about? Do you ask a lot of questions? Can you tell me a bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I did talk to those historians, but I will tell you, one of the funny stories from the last district I worked in. We let a process go through. What I did was I came in, met everybody, started that process of learning who they are and their families and all of that, and who's responsible for what. You kind of take a step back and you watch certain processes happen,
Hmm.
state reporting or Medicaid reporting or railroad crossings or driver updates or whatever it is, IEP meetings. I sat back and allowed the process to continue the way that they were doing it, even though I saw some things that were wrong. But I did that so that I could see and then use that data as the building block for changes to come. So when the process failed and some things were not done in accordance to the way they should have been done, uh, the next time that process happened, we had changed that process. The differences in the data spoke for itself.
Yeah.
And so when you come in, when I walk into a place, I'm going to take a step back and see the processes that are happening. I can't make changes or make things work better if I don't know happening now. So sometimes you have to let processes fail, and come apart so that you can begin to lead with those changes. I'm a leader. I think we talked about this before, because people don't want a tyrant. People don't want a boss that dictate and tell them what to do. Um,
Hmm.
I I have gained many wonderful, amazing friendships from previous employees that I worked with. And it was because I would roll up my sleeves. If one of my payroll team were out and I needed to get in there and add up timesheets, I would do it. If routing had somebody out and I needed to jump in, I would. You show by doing, and that's how I gained a lot of my employees' trust. Um, and that trust is because my word was bond and I stood
Hmm.
on my word. I talked the talk, but I also walked the walk. And that's important. But as a supervisor, as that manager, I always lead people. I try to lead people down the path that they should go and the right things to do. Now, if they choose to go otherwise, well, we all know what happens when those situations happen. But it's important to really walk that walk with your employees. You'll gain that trust and respect from them a lot quicker if they see that you're not blowing smoke.
I think there's so many takeaways from that, from everything you've just said. But my key takeaways, my active takeaways that I want everyone to take from this webinar, is, you know, go in day one, talk to as many people as possible, learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can. Step two, observe, learn the processes as they're currently done. You won't know how to fix anything unless you identify what's actually going on A to Z. If you start throwing in a lot of new variables, that in turn could lead you to having skewed data, or rather, you're not seeing the process play out all the way. Um, Three is, again, your word's your bond. So go in there. If you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to take care of them, take care of it. And fourth, and I think what's the biggest is that, and this is a recurring theme through all transportation. Every district I talk to, you get the rock stars in there that if people start throwing their hands in the air and they say, this is not my job, that puts it in
The
a hard
job will
spot for
never
everyone.
get done.
The job will never
Correct.
get done. It's,
Mhm.
we go into transportation departments. Everyone goes into transportation departments, and you have assignments, right? A dispatcher does dispatching, a router does routing. But there are so many different variables that go into transportation, and there's so many complexities that go into transportation that you really need those rock stars to help fill the gaps. To say they're not too good for a job, they'll put the hats on. They'll wear the million different hats that they have to, and I think that is a key way to buy trust in a new environment. It's to have
Mhm.
those conversations. It's to learn where the gaps might be, and to just say yes. Just be a yes man, be a yes woman. In doing so, you'll learn much faster, and you'll also have this ability to get respect from the team. that you're not just someone that's punching the clock, or what's the phrase, punching in and punching out, or riding the clock. You're there to improve lives. You're there to help student transportation, and we need a lot of that throughout the country.
And I also think that it's important to share with your staff the whys,
Yeah.
why we're making this decision, why it has to be this way, and not just because the district wants you to. I was a believer. I taught, I tried to instill in all of my staff the laws that they work under, the policies they work under, so that they would understand how their job affected the next, and that
Mhm.
next job affects the next. Transportation is tied at the seams. Everybody's job correlates with somebody else's. And so when you have those people that say it's not my job, now it's going to affect this one, and this one not having what they need is going to affect the next one. And I think that that's one of the things that you have to remember, is to explain to them the whys, but also give them and help them learn their knowledge, that they really understand the whys, why you can't let a kid cross the street, or why you need to, that kid has to walk to school, he doesn't get a bus. If they understand that, they have more knowledge to help deal with those parent calls that come in as well.
Totally agree. And I think, yeah, from the leadership perspective, I think that'll go a long way with getting buy-in and getting trust. It's being open, it's being communicative. When when things feel like a black box and no one quite understands why the decisions are made, that leads to, I don't want to say frustration, but that leads to confusion, or people won't always like give their all to something if they don't get why it's happening that way. And so that transparency is key to building that trust, particularly early on if you're newer to a leadership role at the district. So let's go into this next one. But, Cindy, I'd love to hear more from you on, we're talking about communication and iteration and improvements and building this trust. Are you a fan of structured, one-on-ones or structured conversations, and setting that up? Like, how would you speak with your leaders, and how would you speak with the people under you to develop trust?
So those people who ever worked with me will tell you that I was an open book. I would speak up, and I would speak up when I saw things weren't going the way that they should, or if they were going the way they should, I would also speak up and celebrate those successes, because those are important as well. I think that in when I worked in Orange, I we did have one-on-ones at evaluation time, but employees and staff need to know way before evaluation time what's going on. So when I say I'm an open book, I would go in if there was an issue, I would call the employee or the staff member, or even to my uppers, and say, "Hey, see this issue, can we talk about it?"
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes people were more open and sometimes they weren't so open. But I think that it goes back to honesty, and in that aspect, when you're dealing with things that may not be so easy to deal with, the honesty happens. Now I will tell you, in my last district, I made a different change, and every day I tried to eat lunch with my staff. I can tell you that there's probably many people on this call like, who has time to sit down and eat with their staff? I'm a believer in, you make time for what you want. And so I would, for us, for 30 minutes, we would sit down, we would talk. It just gave them an open, non-biased time in a relaxed atmosphere. When you break bread together, they had an open forum to ask questions or to just chit chat. It wasn't always about work. We talked a lot, but I also learned a lot of things about my staff during those times, just listening to their conversations. And
Mhm.
so listening is the biggest key to communication. And scheduling check-ins, yes, but I also did it on an open level with all of my staff, either at lunch or at breakfast, or we would go out on a Friday afternoon when there was no school. Those kinds of things are important, of course, at the end of the year evaluation, but you got 11 months before that evaluation happens to also make sure that you're having those check-ins, that they feel successful and that things are moving in the way that they should.
Right. Yeah, you want to overcompensate, or you want to like overcorrect. You want to have as much communication as possible. So if you identify
Correct.
an issue, or if you identify something that you think maybe could be worked on, people have ample time to address those things.
Correct.
That's what I ask. That's what I ask from my boss as well, right? I want to make sure that I'm doing everything right. I'm checking all the boxes, and if I'm not, please help give me that feedback. And so building that culture of honesty and feedback is so key to success. Um,
For sure.
One thing I think that I would like to include here too, that I feel bad for not including, is the ability when we're talking with folks and when we're communicating with folks is learning from each other, even outside of the district. So that's why I like having webinars like this, where we can talk about best practices and key takeaways. That's why I like state conferences, national conferences, local, TAPT chapters or RISAs or everything in between, right? I don't think there's a good substitute for having conversations with folks and learning best practices and how they're doing things in different areas. So you can go and take that information back to your district. And I think that helps you establish leadership and helps you establish ideas that when you come home and you're trying to build this trust in the new district you're in, it's not just, hey, it's me, I made this up right here. It's, or, this is what I think, but all I have is my gut reflex. You can say instead, oh, they're doing it like this over here, over here, over here. And it gives you some extra tools in the tool chest to both win trust and also deploy solutions. And so want to talk to you about that as well, like your thoughts on the ability to talk with your neighbors or neighboring districts, particularly in your early days too. So not just talking with your staff, but talking with surrounding staffs. Did you do a lot of that?
I did, and I will tell you that when I moved from driver into the routing office and was given an opportunity to go to my first state transportation conference in Florida, the FAPT, I was flabbergasted. I had no idea the world that was out there beyond the four walls of the routing office I worked in. I jumped on state committees. I went
Yeah.
to special needs conferences. I went to TSD in Texas. I went to STN. Anytime I was able to go to a conference or a workshop, I would take the opportunity and go. But I also believed in sending my staff. And so one of the biggest keys to success is networking. And you have to have support of those that are like-minded, because not everybody understands transportation, that understand what you face every day. Uh, at those conferences, at those local conferences, at Bus Planners Summit for our customers, it's one of those things that you hear conversations. Well, how do you do this? Well, we do it this way. Well, what would happen if you did it this way? You find ideas, you hear the same struggles that you're struggling. And I think the
Mhm.
biggest thing is you realize you're not on an island by yourself. There's hundreds of thousands of transportation personnel across this amazing nation that work in those same struggles every day. So networking and reaching out to those people. When I was in Osceola, we had another district come visit us. I took staff and we went to another district and visited them. It creates a network for you, for those people to pick up the phone and call and say, I have this issue. How do you guys handle it, to try to help problem solve?
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, I think when you're new to a district, um, you got to learn your systems cold. You got to learn how they're doing it right now. But you also want to make sure you keep friends around, as that's a way for you to also build trust with your team. It's like, oh, you're experiencing this. Like, I know Darla down the road, and Darla does it this way, and maybe I should connect you to. Don't be afraid of doing that. I mean, transportation is a lot. There's so many different things you need to know. Lever the resources, lever the relationships. You can read it in the book all day, but I think truly talking with folks, it sticks a little better. And it also just gives you a view, as you're describing, Cynthia, of like this grander world out there and all the different ways you can do a job. No one person has a perfect system. It just does not exist. But being able to learn from each other and iterate, will take you very far. All right,
Yeah,
so
being
let's.
open to
Oh
share
yeah,
that kind of information with other people is a great way to learn, but it's also a great way to get uh to find solutions for problems that you may have.
no, completely agree. Um, all right, so you're in the office. You're new to a transportation team. You talk with all the folks. You're building that trust. You're learning. You feel like you're starting to get comfortable, right? You're getting the systems. You can hold your own in a conversation, and now you've identified some of the challenges in the current office that you've joined. How do you go about now doing that next step? How do you go about doing maybe some of the projects that you want to do or making some of the changes while making sure that people are still happy with you, making sure you still have that buy-in and you've earned that trust and that ability to talk? Uh, I think to put it simply, it's data, right? It's removing that gut feel that you come in and say, I think we should do it this way. The existing team says, no, we should do it this way. Use the data, use the hard numbers. So I want to talk to you a lot about data, Cindy, because I know you're a big fan. I know you like to make the numbers dance the way you need them to dance, like by pulling all of the information you need and making these informed decisions. And so I want to talk to you about how you've used data in the past to, once you're past this initial buy trust phase, how do you use data to get folks to agree to roll with you on new decisions or new processes?
So data, KPIs, data, business decisions are based on data. Data gives you a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, sure, on-time performance, ridership patterns, route efficiencies, but each person in each district has a different idea of what a route efficiency looks like for them. And
1000%.
so, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, I also looked at regular gen ed students' ride time versus special needs students' ride time. A lot of times, special needs students' ride time is a lot longer than a gen ed student. We're setting those special needs students up for failure if you're not looking at some of those lengths of rides
Mm-hmm.
because of the program. Sometimes I went to the district and said, hey, look at this ride time for these special needs students. Can we look to move this program from this school to this school? It will drop their ride time by 30 minutes or 15 minutes. When you present data to people, they can't argue with it. Black and white is black and white, and being able to use that data for those good decisions is important. One of the amazing things about Bus Planner, when I started with Osceola, is where I was first introduced to Bus Planner. I think you've heard me say it, and I want everybody to hear me say this. I wished I'd have had Bus Planner, not the last 7 of my career, but the first 30 of my career. My life would have been a lot easier. The Bus Planner has the dashboard. When you open that program and that dashboard show comes up, most of my KPIs are right there with how many elementary kids, what length of ride time, all of that information is right there was right there at my fingertips. It also allowed me to use the optimization and the data from that ride time, from looking at adjusting school bell times, uh, to be able to save 17% of our routes in Osceola. Um, that's huge when it comes to the shortage of bus drivers. But if you have that kind of data, and every district looks at different things, but I think ride time is something that is not looked at as much as it should be. But Bus Planner does have all the tools to make those amazing decisions based on that data that you can get out of the software.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm hearing it more and more. Again, I'm talking with districts across the country, and some of the states are beginning to mandate it, right? Students can't ride
Yes.
the bus, for longer than 60 minutes. And so that's amazing. We need that, there will always be some certain cases, you have a McKinney-Vento pickup 60 miles away or something that's out of, there's nothing we can do about that. But in general, we
Right.
want to limit as many students that are riding for over an hour. It's bad. It contributes to chronic absenteeism. You get students that are tired. They're not able to perform their best in the classroom. It's a lot, it's very taxing emotionally on the students. It's also taxing on the drivers as well to be able to do those long haul runs and stay consistent. And I think that all those things are wrapped together, right? So being able to marry this data is so key. Sorry, Cindy.
No, I was just going to say that sometimes the data that you gather is not just to make changes in transportation. I gathered a lot of data to make changes at the district level as a whole with program placement, with where they chose to add new schools based on the ride time for those kiddos. So when you gather data, it really is beyond just transportation. It's data that the district can use as a whole.
Totally agree. And I think that oftentimes when folks are brought into new transportation departments, again, whether you're a router, a dispatcher, a transportation director, ops manager, everything in between, usually it's like, there's some sort of measurement you're being measured to, which is you come into a new team and it's like chronic absenteeism is going up, or we have this driver shortage, or, our kids are sitting on the bus for too long. And if you're not identifying some of those things, that's an awesome thing you can do day one to start building trust with folks and saying, how can we get better? What can we demand better of the area? How do we improve our services for students? And again, we're all mission driven here in transportation, particularly in K-12. People transportation, what is huge is getting those kids to school on time, getting them there safely, and giving them the best shot at an education, giving them what they need. And so if you're not tracking this stuff, this is low-hanging fruit. Day one, you can start trying to track this data and seeing it. It is key. Ultimately, having the hard numbers gets transportation a seat at the table when those decisions are made, as you're talking about, Cindy, whether it's a school closure or a school opening, it's an expansion, it's decisions on where programs take place. All of it ties together, and all of it's affected by transportation. And sometimes transportation affects all of it as well. But sometimes transportation doesn't get that seat at the table. And so that is a huge way to win trust and to build influence. Day one, when you're joining a new team, is being the voice for that data. And again, getting the considerations of other members of the team, the historians, the people that have been there, that have seen different projects. But you got to know those numbers cold, and you got to be able to pull those numbers easily. Mm-hmm. And so just a little more on data, Cindy. I think it's helpful if you can share some of your best practices on reducing that route time, just for folks that are newer to routing teams or newer transportation directors. If you have some wisdom to impart.
It's involving those key stakeholders that create those program placements, which is usually with special needs students. It's usually your exceptional student education department. I'm a believer in relationships with those people. What I did affected them. What they chose to do affected me. I created a great communication line with them where I would say, hey, these kids are on the bus, an hour and a half. If we can move the program over one school, I can rearrange 2 runs because I've looked at it with the routing team, and we can delete 1 run, but create these other 2 that's going to get these kids to school in 20 minutes versus an hour and a half. So it's involving those key stakeholders who understand those kinds of nuances of program placement, school placement, and really having that open line of communication. But the biggest thing is looking at what your state says is your kids should be on the bus for. In Florida, it says no more than 55 minutes where practicable. And so a lot of districts hang their hat on that practicable, may not be practicable, and it isn't good for kids. And so it's one of those things to make sure you include all of those stakeholders in those data decisions, especially when you have that kind of data.
Completely agree. And so I think that ties back to one of our earlier key takeaways, where it's talk to everyone in your department, build trust. But again, transportation touches so many different other departments, whether it's parents, it's staff, it's admin, everyone across the board. Have those conversations with them too. If you're not in a leadership position, talk with your leaders about it and express that you want to build relationships with some of those folks outside of the transportation department, but that affect transportation directly. It'll go a long way. All right.
And
So,
network with
yeah,
your other counties around you to help you. I encourage my teams to reach out, dispatchers, reach out to a dispatcher at another. How do y'all do it? How do you handle it? Router, reach out to another router at another district. Create that relationship, open up that door where you can have that person to bounce that information back and forth with.
100%. I agree. Um, all right, folks, time for another poll. I promised two, so this is our last one here. But what performance metric defines success for newcomers in your district? How do you measure that success? Should be opened up now. I see it on along, Cindy. What are you saying on it?
And the metric defines success for newcomers. The first one was driver retention. But right now it's coming out willingness to work with the team, and driver retention is coming in second. But those are two huge things. Um, I will tell you one of the statements that I heard when I came into one of my new districts was that my predecessor wouldn't make that decision, or they changed that, or they did this, or they did that. During those times when I would have somebody make a statement like that about my predecessor, I would really listen even more carefully. And I would try to learn and understand their preferences and ask them for input at that point if my predecessor. And so the willingness to work with the team is important. Uh, and driver retention is super important. Willingness to work with the team, Gus, is number one, and driver retention is number two. And I would agree. I think you have to be open and willing to work with anybody and everybody. Put your personal opinion and personal feelings to the side. It's a job, and work with the team. And driver retention is important, especially in today's age. I've been on with customers who said I've lost 7 drivers, and then I've been on with customers that said I just stole 10 from the neighboring district. And so driver retention is key. It is key to success of these districts. Without drivers, kids aren't getting anywhere.
Agreed. I'm going to say something that on paper kind of opposes itself, but I think it's important to note that in transportation, we walk a fine line, or we dance along a very particular path, because it's so important to get the team to buy in, to have this group, everyone aligned on everything. But also, and we're emphasizing this a lot throughout the conversation, but we do want to say that sometimes you can't have every decision made by a pure committee. Sometimes you just have to make the
Right.
choice, and you just got to get
Of
it done.
course.
And so finding that balance is key, and executing on that is key. But keep these two conflicting things in mind as you're moving forward. That's a big takeaway for me during this conversation.
If you build that trust in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have less issues when you do. There's many decisions I had to make. It wasn't team collaboration, but there was a lot that affected them that was team collaboration. But my team trusted me. And so because my team trusted me, they knew that I wasn't making, whether they liked the decision that was made or not, they knew that there was business at hand that had to be done.
They knew you made it for a good reason. You've built that
Right,
trust, and so when you make a
right,
decision, even if people disagree with it, they understand that, like, well, she wouldn't just make up a decision for some reason. There's some reason for it,
right,
and then you have that
right.
open culture where they can ask you about it, and that is, you will go very far with that recipe. Cindy, any closing thoughts? I think I'm not seeing another question in, so I think we can probably call it there. But any closing thoughts
I,
here?
Thank you guys for the time, for taking the time to sit with Gus and I today. Gus, thank you for joining us with me. You talked about yellow blood. I've said it before. After 33 years in a school district, you don't bleed red anymore. You bleed yellow. I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest key takeaway for me would be that you all understand that being open and honest and be flexible with changes. But know that transportation is an area that may not be a place that you get a lot of rewards, but you do gain a lot of knowledge, and that's more worth than any rewards you'll ever get.
Completely agree. Well, thank you, folks. This has been awesome. If you have any questions, you can always email us afterwards. We appreciate you. You can learn more about us at BusPlanner.com. We host these webinars once a month. There's a wealth of these on either the website. We also have them on YouTube. So if you want to check them out on YouTube, awesome. There's great stuff like the ebooks. I'll send out that KPI ebook shortly. But again, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. I know it's hard to carve an hour out of the day in transportation. We're talking about many hats, right? So we appreciate you being able to be here and sharing time with us. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye all.